Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Covert. Is Beijing already in the midst of a Cold War with the West and Taiwan in the battle for information that will ultimately decide whether China will become the world's dominant power? Espionage by many countries is carried out through satellites, surveillance technology like CCTV, or even spy balloons, as well as through human spying, which we are focusing on in today's show. With me to discuss this are Dennis Weng, Sam Houston State University in Texas Political Science Associate Professor, and Wen-Ti Sung, Atlantic Council Global China Hub Non-Resident Fellow. Dennis, Wen-Ti, very warm welcome to the show today. But first, China's intelligence agency, the Ministry of State Security, the MSS, has announced it has arrested a 39-year-old ministry official. The agency says is a spy for its American counterpart, the CIA. It's the second case announced by China in the space of a month. The first case allegedly involved a 52-year-old employee of a state-run arms company. Now, it's rare for China to publicly name organizations or nations involved in spying, according to the South China Morning Post. This latest arrest comes after a few developments in this space: the introduction of China's new anti-espionage law, the call by Beijing on the Chinese public to help enforce that law, comments by CIA Director William Burns that it had made progress in rebuilding its spy networks in China. Wen-Ti, let me come to you first. How do you see the latest two announcements about the arrests of the perhaps CIA agents by Beijing?
Obviously, it tells us that there is a significant degree of intelligence and spying activity going on between the two sides. I think that's a given. I think one other indicator is that this points to a broader trend, really, especially since the 20th Party Congress, when we saw CCP reframing what they call the center of gravity for their policymaking. We know that ever since 1987, in their party charter, they've always said that economic construction is the center of everything they do. By last year, 2022, they changed it to, henceforth, China wants to rebalance, get the optimal balance, if you will, between economic development and national security. Now, when you go from A towards A and B, people know that your focus is on B, hence national security. So as a part and parcel of that, you see China making ever more moves in terms of cracking down data sovereignty, for example, in terms of getting more control over leading social media companies inside China as a way to protect their data, so as to keep it out of the hands of Western companies. You see this as well, for example, in how they are. There are definitely recent reports about how China is increasingly keeping a very tight grip over what they call due diligence companies in China. Those companies that help international companies making inroads into China's market by giving them various kind of background vetting to help them. All this is all in the name of data sovereignty, but of course they always come back to this security first mindset.
Dennis, your thoughts on that? Why now? Why the shift to national security? Why the tightening, as Wen-Ti has?
I think in the broader sense that we see the U.S.-China competition is now more obvious and more clear. The clear picture is that both sides like to get more information, but it's more difficult, right? On the surface, they'd like to build up some certain communication line, but it's very obvious the communication line is not very constructive. So how do we get the information from the other side? Intelligence, collecting more intelligence information is important. So, at this moment, we see both sides want to get others' information more. So espionage, people say competition or war is what we see now. But another thing is that we also see the news media kind of pick up more this kind of story. Why? I believe that just like Secretary Blinken mentioned at the very beginning of his term, he said we need to let general public know what's going on. We need to get information. We need to get attention, regarding the national security and U.S. foreign policy. So I think one possible reason why we see more and more attention on media picking up this espionage incident is because the U.S. government also wants people to know the situation and kind of make people aware we are in the competition.
Wen-Ti, that also can we also see, therefore, that China, in a sense, is trying to do the same thing? I mentioned that the South China Morning Post said it's rare for Beijing to name the nation or name the organization.
Indeed, I think for them, this is increasingly a battle over narrative. And we always know that whenever you see bilateral moves going on, they always have audience beyond the government of the other country. So sometimes the audience could be third countries who are thinking about doing more business with China. This could be a deterrent whenever US, for example, publicizes about spying issues with China. For the same reason, when China publishes stories about how Americans, quote-unquote, spies might have been caught by Chinese counterintelligence, that again also send a message to other Western companies as well as China's domestic audience that there is increasingly a tightening going on. So if you want to have interaction with foreigners without clear, unambiguous clearance, you better think twice or better be extra careful.
Do you think there's any link between, you know, the launch of their anti-espionage law and then the call on the public to support this? Do you think there's a link between that and then announcing the 2 spy cases?
Yeah, I mean, naturally, when you publish a law, you want people to support it, so I think that's natural. One thing I will note, however, about timing is that the anti-espionage law was passed, I believe, I think it was April this year. That came actually within weeks of one other development, and that is by the end of March this year was when China finally lifted all travel restrictions, especially for group tourism coming from foreign countries. So you can see how China, on the one hand, they are trying to say we are opening up, but at the same time, they don't want people to get the wrong idea, so they immediately pass another law that's sort of complemented by saying we're opening up, but that doesn't mean we're going easy on data protection, doesn't mean we're going easy on people having unregulated, unsupervised interaction that may infringe on China's national security, extremely broadly and ambiguously defined.
Dennis?
It's a very typical strategy for PRC. On the one hand, I want to show I'm very friendly, but on the other hand, I also give you the warning. You know, don't expect that you can come here and get everything, right? So it's very typical. But we know that in the past. But now China is more eagerly and willing to provide or reveal that kind of message, which also reflect the Xi Jinping and the PRC want to potentially share with their own audience. We are powerful, we are stronger China now. So I think there's a lot of different implication.
Dennis, let me ask you further. So there were also the 2 US Navy sailors who have been arrested, accused of spying for China. What do we know about this, and what was the information that was critical for Taiwan?
Well, a couple of things is really worth noting. First, both are Chinese American. They do have some connections with the Chinese community, and that's really a big concern down the road. But what they share, the intelligence information, what we know is they share, the U.S. Navy diplomat, and they share the equipment, the pictures, and also they share, the radar system blueprint. Those are very critical. But to Taiwan, I think the most critical part is they share the, the vessel deployment in Indo-Pacific Ocean, and also how the U.S. potentially leak how the U.S. and Taiwan will collaborate when something happened. I think to Taiwan we have to really look into whether this kind of information is shared through this espionage incident, and also. We also, from Taiwan's perspective, Taiwan also need to understand, whenever we share information with the U.S., there is also a potential that the information will be leaked, not because Taiwan, but because the U.S. So I think the U.S. Navy need to be very careful about the situation, because that situation could apply to Japan, to Korea, and they were also concerned.
Yes, absolutely, about the vulnerabilities in the US system too. I just wanted to note that radar system was in Japan and a US base in Japan, and that's why it was critical for Taiwan. Wen-Ti, so there was also the Microsoft and Five Eyes announcement, about this group called Volt Typhoon. It was described as one of the largest known cyber espionage campaigns against American critical infrastructure. What does it say that Microsoft made this announcement? That's pretty significant, right?
Yeah, I mean, that may just speak to I mean, there's many ways to read it. You can read it as just good old corporate citizenship, right? To publicize when there are data security concerns for itself, its partners, and its customers. On the other hand, of course, you can also read it as a way of Microsoft to do political PR at a time when interaction between U.S.-China are gradually recovering, when they are, again, more perhaps American businesses exploring possibility of reestablishing commercial linkages with China. They also know, however, at the same time, there is strategic competition going on between the two sides, and that atmosphere can be a little bit more peculiar. Mm-hmm. So I think for U.S. businesses, it's probably a good practice and good PR for them whenever they are potential risk factors, that they publish it so that they know, they can let people know when they explore possibility of advancing in Chinese market, that will not come at the expense of their continued commitment to U.S. values.
Dennis, do you want to also add on to that, you know, the fact that this was Guam, what's the significance for Taiwan then?
Well, I think first of all, I'd like to reflect
Sure.
when I'll respond. Wen-Ti, I think I agree with Wen-Ti, what he just mentioned. The PR things, you know, it's a great PR for you know, corporation specifically mention this kind of situation and let people know we are on the right side and we are, you know, we're doing whatever to protect our customer and show a very positive impression and image. And for Guam, I think, you know, at this stage, you know, the U.S.-China competition is very clear. Taiwan has to be very clear, you know, I'm not saying Taiwan need to pick side, but Taiwan has to understand the situation totally, thoroughly. Not pick, even if we don't like to pick side, but we need to know, okay, how are we going to support the U.S., how are we going to support our allies, and how our ally could potentially support us when we share all the information. Guam, Okinawa, and all the nearby military base is important to us. The radar system share information. I think it's about time for Taiwan to seriously consider, you know, what's the standard procedure, and also what's the, you know, the information we like to share with all the allies in the nearby military base.
But surely Taiwan is also vulnerable to these sorts of attacks. Maybe our defenses are much stronger. I want to ask you finally, Dennis, just want to quote what American Enterprise Institute's John Ferrari says the scale of the Chinese spying operation is unmatched in history. And of course, he's referring there not just these cases that we've mentioned, but Huawei, universities, stealing tech and secrets, obviously theft of IP, all of this. Would you agree with the sentiment of that statement? I
think the statement in general is correct. But the difficult part is that everyone seems to know, oh, this is coming. But it's very difficult to form a consensus. You know, even within Taiwan, if you ask Chinese people, you know, how you worry about the situation, not many people says I'm extremely worried. So that's the problem, right? So in order to actually deal with the situation, deal with the so-called espionage war or competition, first thing I think is to form certain consensus. Let people know this is a very serious deal. Okay, it is not about anti-China. It is about protecting your own interest. You know, even if you like to make deal or trade with China, you still have to know there's certain information you like to keep it secret in order to talk to China in the future. Doesn't necessarily mean we're gonna against you, but there's something we have to hold it. Just like you play card, you know, you have to hide your card. You don't, you know, reveal all your card at once. So there's a consensus need to be formed before we actually, you know, talk about how to compete. I think at this moment, within Taiwan, a consensus need to be formed, and also once we have that, you know, consensus, then we could potentially get better idea how to deal with, like how to handle it and how to collaborate with our ally.
Okay, let's talk about the commercial side. I mean, the pull of China, of course, as you mentioned, is the business interest, but that doesn't mean that we should sell out national security. I think that was your message. The Washington Post reported in July that Japan's defense ministry networks were hacked into by China. The infiltration was described as the worst in Japan's history. I asked Patrick Cronin, Hudson Institute's Asia-Pacific Security Chair, why this was so concerning to the United States and Taiwan. Let's take a look.
Well, it's critically important that secure communications allow for governments, including Japan in this case, to be able to conduct operations to respond to a crisis. And if they're having critical infrastructure and communications fall down at the moment of most need, clearly that would disrupt an operational response to a crisis like an invasion of Taiwan or an attack on Japan or an attack elsewhere in the region. Clearly, the Chinese are intensifying their ability to try to penetrate classified military communications and other critical infrastructure that militaries would need to conduct operations so that they can help disrupt and thwart a response to Chinese aggression in the region, including against Taiwan, and probably specifically against Taiwan. That is, this is a scenario where the Chinese want to be essentially preempting a military coalition response to their own aggression.
What do we know about what kind of information could have been leaked to the Chinese?
Well, there was a very fine expose in the Washington Post, and based on that reporting, which is mostly reliable, but still it's only reporting about what people have told those journalists, is that military plans were at least being targeted by the Chinese in that breach. At the same time, we've since had the Japanese government come out and said that they didn't feel any of the attacks actually compromised critical information and data. We don't know that's to be entirely true, but we do know that Japan and the United States have been working feverishly on improving cybersecurity. So
you mentioned that it's clear that the Chinese are intensifying their efforts in this space. Does that indicate anything to you in terms of, their own intention to take any sort of military action?
It tells me that they are preparing for having the capability to conduct a military operation, including against Taiwan if necessary. It does not say anything about their willingness to actually conduct a military operation against Taiwan or against others in the region. I know these digital systems are at the heart of communications, and therefore, if they can get the upper hand eventually, maybe through artificial intelligence and quantum computing and other technologies that are emerging, then they feel that they may be able to truly deter outside forces from intervening on behalf of Taiwan or in a different contingency. So they're not going to stop building these capabilities. We're not going to stop trying to defend our capabilities and helping allies and partners, but China's getting more intensified about wanting to be able to breach and have a dominance in the cyber domain.
That was Patrick Cronin of Hudson Institute speaking from Washington, D.C. He points out crucially for Taiwan that China's hacking of Japan's defense networks is to thwart or preempt a military coalition in response to any Beijing aggression, perhaps specifically against Taiwan. Dennis, let me come to you. So can we see there in the interview with Patrick the link between the information war, the spying for information warfare, and the open warfare?
Mm-hmm. Well, apparently you have to start getting information, getting data and intelligence information before you can actually fight a winnable war, right? You like to get more understanding about the situation. That's why there's a linkage for sure. The espionage war is for PRC at this moment. Probably they think they have to take action. They have to start doing this, and then so they can be better prepared. Especially the POA is getting more idea how to prepare themselves for a potential war in this area against not only Japan but actually the U.S. So try to test the vulnerability of Japan and try to test how strong the coalition between U.S. Japan, between U.S. Korea, between U.S. Taiwan is part of the war, because the POA really care is definitely not Japan, South Korea, or Taiwan. It's actually the U.S. behind that.
They are trying to find out whether Japan does actually have plans to come to the defense of Taiwan in a Taiwan contingency.
And also how strong and how much information they actually share among those so-called like Indo-Pacific allies. I think that's something a PRC really like to figure out. But whether this kind of espionage war really directly linked to a potential, military conflict, I think it's too early to say, because I don't think POA at this moment is ready for a real fight.
Right.
But they are getting ready.
So, like Patrick said, and Dennis also said, that's the intent to get the capability rather than to intent to take any action, Wen-Ti.
Yeah, I mean, China obviously want to get as much access as they can, and even when it comes to this alleged hacking of Japan's defense ministry, for example, they can get useful information not only about whether Japan will be involved in a Taiwan contingency, but also how, to what extent, how strong is the societal consensus, which faction perhaps, or which services in Japan military and politics are likely to be stronger, which are perhaps a bit more hesitant or ambivalent. I think all these are important information for them, both in security realm, but also in terms of the subsequent political persuasion, diplomatic front as well. And if I were to take it to another direction as well, we can look at it not only in terms of China's gain, but also in terms of Japan's potential loss. So following this hacking, for example, I think there were reports about how U.S. intelligence tried to then help Japan's intelligence to sort of fix the problem, to find out where exactly it was a hole there that enabled this hacking. And whenever you are a sovereign government and another sovereign government trying to say, let me get into your back office and figure out this stuff for you,
it's dangerous.
That's also slightly concerning as well. Like, no matter how good of friends you may be, that's still an issue. So the very fact that this thing came to light and this issue happened at all, and this U.S.-Japan negotiation was going on about how much to help and how to help, that's already a potential factor that could lead to some slight fissure in terms of that relations. All these work in China's favor.
Dennis,
Yes.
would you like to comment on, how Japan has responded?
See, it's a very simple metaphor, like, how close we are. I mean, how much openness you are willing to share with your so-called allies or friends. When someone come to your house and say, "Oh, your house is not secure, so let me walk into your bathroom and check," right? Are you willing to do so? So Japan is actually.
Let me take your keys.
Yeah.
Were you happy for me to take your keys?
That's right. That's a metaphor, right? And it's a very serious question for any sovereign state. So even if we're very close for Taiwan, even if we're very close to the U.S. or very close to Japan, how open we're willing to allow people to check all our system? And that's a big question. And if we don't allow them, or if Japan isn't willing to share every detail, then the next question is perhaps your ally also will question, oh, I couldn't help. There's nothing I can do, even though I can see you are vulnerable, but you're not willing to help. So whether they can still have this kind of close friendship or whether they will affect the coalition.
I just want to build on your metaphor because, you're talking about the house, it's your house. Are you going to let somebody in and check the locks and all this sort of thing?
Yeah.
But of course, the reason why the US is particularly concerned is because it exposes their own information, intelligence, secrets, vulnerabilities.
But
So the metaphor is somewhat limited. I mean, we have to acknowledge that.
that's right. So, I
So
said,
they've
it's
got
my
their gold
house,
in
right?
there.
It's our house, right?
But they've got their gold in your house.
Yeah. The thing is, it's our house. Okay. Would you willing to trust me? If I said, I'll check everything myself, would you be willing to trust me? We're close friends, right? Japan will say the same thing. Japan will say, okay, I take your advice. I'll check every detail, but you got to trust me. I am capable of checking all the detail. So the question go back to the U.S., whether U.S. would be willing to trust their ally is capable of doing that.
Yeah.
So like Wen-Ti just mentioned, it will probably potentially lead to, certain uncertainty. And the trust level maybe even decline because of this.
Wen-Ti, let's talk about then the bigger picture in terms of, who, if we are saying that this is a battle for information, at the moment, who do you think is winning?
Well, if I absolutely had to pick one, then I think I'll have to pick the U.S. side for now. Of course, U.S. still the standard setter for many issues, be it in cyberspace, be it for control over international organization that sets standard for cybersecurity protocol more broadly defined, ICANN, for example. So I think all these factors are at play, and U.S. at this present moment and for the foreseeable future still has the largest number of strong, viable allies and partners who are able to work in tandem with the U.S. for the purpose of global cybersecurity and other kind of be it intelligence or information settings. So on that, they almost have a building advantage. China at this present moment is still playing the catch-up game.
Dennis,
I'll bet on the U.S. for now. Why I say for now is because it's also about how you approach to your ally, right? At this moment, the Biden administration looks friendly, but the biggest concern and factor is the 2024 election is coming.
Yes.
Well, the greatest President Trump, it's a potentially bring uncertainty. It happened before, right? Allies really don't know what the U.S. will be, right, and how they're gonna action. So I think there's a big factors in the whole situation. Allies now is willing to cooperate because the way they approach is trustworthy, is trustable, and they are kind of gentle. They give you advice. The Biden administration give Asian allies advice, and also invite Japan and Korea to Camp David, kind of form a formal coalition and regularize that, which is great, which is kind of give the warranty to their allies. But does that kind of guarantee or warranty stand? Whether the 2024 will change something, we have to wait and see. But for now, the U.S. is taking the right direction and right strategy. But there's still, it may vary because of the administration.
I have to wrap it up there. Dennis, Wen-Ti, thank you so much for joining Taiwan Talks today. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching our show today. Stay safe and see you next time.